Welcome to this fourth session, Managing Progress and Change. Any project you undertake would involve some change. So, how do you manage the progress that you are making and the change that you are bringing about? So what are we going to do here? You should, at the end, be able to list the main project deliverables, outline the different types of testing, explain some of the issues associated with managing change, discuss configuration management, and describe two types of project management review. There's a few principles that are underlying management. There are four things that a manager you can control. Resources, you can get more money, facilities or personnel. Time, you can increase the schedule, delay milestones, etc. Products, you can reduce the functionality or increase it or take away some requirements. Risk, you can decide what risks are acceptable and which ones are not. You need to understand the goals and objectives and quantify them where possible. Understand the constraints. If there's uncertainty, use probability estimates. You must plan to meet the objectives within the constraints and monitor and adjust the plan. Preserve a calm, productive, and positive work environment. You cannot control what you cannot measure. There's something you need to keep in mind. In this session, we'll look at stages of system development, requirement specification, verification and validation, testing, delivery to operations, issues associated with managing change, project deliverables, configuration management, project reports, and management reviews. We have talked about project life cycles previously, and we said we can have project management life cycle, systems development life cycle, and this considers systems life cycle. So at the top, you can manage the project, and you have the project management processes. In the systems development life cycle, you can modify the system, and there are system development processes. And then, of course, there's a systems life cycle, which run the system with operational processes, including the working practices. What are the project management process groups? So there are a number of process groups that are involved in project management. So if you take a project management processes, which is an iterative thing, then you have initiating processes, planning processes, executing processes, monitoring and control processes, and closing processes. And all these five processes are iterative in nature. So, the initiating processes, what are they? In an initiating process, you have to develop the project charter or contract. What is involved in the planning processes? You need to develop a project management plan. Define the scope. Create the work breakdown structure. Do the quality planning. Do the risk management planning. In the executing processes, you need to direct and manage the project execution as well as the quality assurance. In the monitoring and control processes, there are a number of things. You need to monitor and control the project work, the change control, scope control, schedule control, cost control, quality control, risk monitoring and control, as well as performance, and then reporting. And then finally, the closing processes would involve closing the project and contract closure. So for each of these processes, we've listed the things that are to be executed under each of them, are to be done under each of them. And remember, these things are iterative. That is, you can move from one to the other and then come back and repeat it. So what things do you deliver at the end of these process groups? In the initiating process, the deliverable there is a project charter or contract. Under the planning processes, the deliverables there are the project management plan. Also, a project scope statement, as well as a work breakdown structure, a project schedule, cost management plan, which is your budget, quality management plan, and risk management plan. So those are the planning processes, the deliverables for that process group. Then the executing processes. What are the deliverables there? System deliverables, work performance information, requested changes and corrective actions. The monitoring and control processes, the deliverables that you'll be looking at are accepted system deliverables, requested changes, approved change requests, reject change requests, corrective actions, preventative actions, quality control measures, performance reports, business review reports, and business review reports. For the closing processes, the deliverables are final project reports and also a post-delivery review report. What is involved in the system development processes? Right. These system development processes are an iterative nature, starting from a feasibility study, from which you do a requirement specification, then a functional specification, a system design, coding, testing, and delivery to operations. So 7 things that are required for the system development processes. What things do you deliver at the end of these processes? For the feasibility study, you need what? A feasibility report. Of course, requirement specification, functional specification, system design, source code and screen layouts, test plans, test data, test reports. And the delivery to operations, you need the implementation plan, installation scripts, the user manual, and the working practices. The feasibility study, these are things that we have identified already or talked about in an earlier session. So I'll urge you to go back and look at that, So is there anyhow the perceived need for change, alignment within organizational strategy and objectives, aim of the project, and so on and so forth. So these items they sort of cover the things that should go into your feasibility study. Also, you can consider those things, which of these would go into your proposal, your final year student proposal. You think about it. Which of the themes here can you fit into your final year student project proposal? Now, what are requirement specifications? What do you do? There is something known as requirement elicitation. You need to find out from your stakeholders what are their requirements. You need to identify these requirements and confirm them. The requirement analysis. Having gotten the requirements from stakeholders, how do these requirements fit together? Because you may have different stakeholders, and each of them would have different requirements. So how do you fit them together? So you've got to do an analysis of these requirements. And then, of course, you've got to do the requirement documentation. That is capturing the requirements for requirements information in a structured way. Requirements can be grouped together into 2 main categories: functional requirements and non-functional requirements. The functional requirements will capture the required functionality of the system, what the system is expected to do, and can be documented as functional descriptions or by using as cases. For a final year student project, again, what do you think will be the functional requirements? What do you expect the system that you want to develop, what do you expect it to be able to do? Non-functional requirements, can be expressed as a system properties or constraints. They include some industry standards, for example, quality requirements, for example, usability, security, availability, and maintainability. workload capacity requirements, and then design constraints. Note that the quality requirements express the project success criteria, and therefore they must be measurable. Let's look at an example of a functional requirement. So, logging requests and appeals. These are requirements associated with the capture of information about applicants. Requirements for information and appeals. This includes the effective handling of the RFI, including searching for requests by same applicant, categorizing the requests against subject list or taxonomy, searching the public authorities' own disclosure log to determine if the information has already been released, and searching for what? Requests. So that's an example of what? A functional requirement. Logging requests and appeals. So your system, you want to be able to log all requests and appeals that have been made. So this functional requirement, you can decompose it into a number of elements. So in this case, we have decomposed it into two elements. So the first one, the functional login application requirement 01. So a description of that is that the user shall be provided with a search facility to determine if the applicant already exists in the system. If the applicant already exists, the user may need to update his or her details. So this is what highly desirable. The second requirement will be that the system shall allow details of new applicants to be captured. This is essential. Of course, there can be a third category, or desirable. So the functional requirements, we can break them down and say there are some of them which are highly desirable, some of them which are essential, and then a third one may be desirable. What about the non-functional requirements? So an example, the system shall comply with the UK government standards catalog that specifies standard format and validation rules for those information types indicated in the appendices. So this is essential because there's a law there and must comply with that. So it's essential. The system shall comply with the National Archives requirements for electronic record management systems. So this is highly desirable. If the system uses an underlying relational database, it must conform to the SQL standard of ISO/IEC 1975. So that's also essential. What do we mean by verification and validation? The question is, when you verify something, the question is, are you building the product correctly? Does the product correspond with its specification? You are designing something, a piece of software. Are you doing it right? Is this software that you are designing going to do the things that have been specified or stated that it will do? What about validation? Again, the same question. Are we building the product right? Is the product fit for its operational mission? The things that we say it should do, is it fit to do it? To do verification, you may need to do unit testing, interface testing, function testing, and system testing. Verification will also involve management progress reviews and technical reviews. To do validation, you need to do user acceptance testing and management business reviews. Testing can be done at the unit or component level. Then you can do integration testing, function testing, systems testing, user acceptance testing, and field testing. But delivery to operations. When you delivery of system software will require documentation, which is a description of delivery, including change control information, an installation script, user manual, and then changes to working practices. One thing that is not mentioned here will be training. How do you work with end users? And working with end users will require some form of authorization, security, work pressures, daily work pattern, business culture, jargon, dress code, access to building. All of this would affect the way that you work with the end users. And there may be some risk to business that you have. The IT experience you have, the existing work practices that are there, the compatibility, the real data, the possibility of running the systems in parallel, and then doing some, retries. When you introduce a new project which brings about change, it is often difficult. People are often reluctant to accept this change, or even to begin a new project. So, there are certain things you need to do. You need to find someone who will champion your cause. So, a business champion. Not only that, you need to include the workers in the design and development, because they are the people going to work with your project, with your product in the final analysis. So you must include them. You must engage them. You need to keep communicating on the progress of the project's progress, so that the stakeholders know what is happening. Don't keep them in the dark. And keep reiterating the business reasons for the project, why it is important. And of course, need to give adequate education and training on the project. Other than that, you meet, a roadblock. People would, will be reluctant to accept the change that is coming. There are a number of things that you do and the deliverables, that are associated with them. And these are indicated in the table. So you have a deliverable that you need to do, the structure of that deliverable, the standards it must comply by, who needs to approve it, and the people resources required to implement that deliverable. So for example, a business case, that must come in the form of a document, and it must comply with organizational standards and IT standards. And this must be approved by the sponsor. And the people you need to push this is a business consultant or project manager or sponsor. So there are quite a number of them. So the tables show you this information. There are a number of documentation standards that you need to be aware of. There are industry standards. There are project management method standards, system development standards within the organization, documentation standards. For a student project, there may be some additional academic documentation standards that you need to comply with. Can you think of any other things, standards in producing your project report? I'll give you an example. Every document submitted to the University of Ghana must conform to the APA standard of referencing, for example. Are there any other things you can think about? So these standards are concerned with both the content and layout. So you must always find out what documentation standards apply and if any templates exist. So for a student project, you must find out what is the content, what's the layout, what standard applies for the University of Ghana, in what form must this be presented, what is the margination, what margins do you need on the right side, the left side, bottom up, what font should you use, the line spacing, all these things are important. There can be some variations in documentation, so you need to be aware of the organizational culture regarding this documentation, whether it should be detailed or light, or upfront or after implementation. So to do for change control, there are a number of things that you need. Every document must have a title. It must have a file name, the document storage, the author's name, the version, date last modified, status, who authorizes it, and whatever changes there are in that document, all need to be specified. We often ignore these things, but they are what? Vitally important for change control in order to monitor what changes are taking place. How do you report project management or project management reporting? There are a number of things. There's status reports, progress reports, and forecast reports. What are these? Reviews that you need to do. There are progress reviews, which include regular meetings that report on the progress against the plan. And there will be discussions to resolve any issues. There will also be business reviews, which are less frequent meetings to consider if the project is doing the right thing for the organization. Normally, the business reviews are linked to contractual points, whether to go or not to go decisions. So, in this session, we've considered certain aspects of system development from a project management perspective. We've looked at requirement specification, project deliverables, testing, delivery to operations, people and change management, standards for deliverables, project management reviews. The aim of all of these things is to help you consider these aspects with regards to your student project. So in doing your student project, you need to think about all of these things and see how you can incorporate that into it. Thank you.